Right now, the deoccupation of Crimea and Donbas has begun. Ukrainian drones are hitting their targets precisely. Shaheds are detonating fuel tanks, tearing them to shreds. The occupiers are in shock. Ukraine is responding powerfully, accurately, and mercilessly. These are no longer just attacks. This is a sentence. At the same time, Ukrainian armed forces drones are striking at the very heart of Russia, putting the entire Russian energy system under attack. Even Moscow couldn't withstand it. Cold, hunger, and darkness are descending upon Putin's capital. A sensation the Ukrainian defense industry is delivering. Lethal innovations at cosmic speed. This latest Ukrainian weapon has turned the tide of the war. The Russians are in panic. No one expected this from us. Incredible. Trump and Xi are discussing a new world order, but no one is controlling the storm that is brewing. Russia is already being divided up at this very moment. The world is trembling. The US and Russia are teetering on the edge of a nuclear abyss. Missiles are ready to launch from their silos. Who will be the first to press the red button? Shock? It's a manhunt. You need to see what's happening in the temporarily occupied territories. The Russian world has revealed its true nature. Mass raids, arrests, and tickets to the meat grinder of war. All this and more in our upcoming episode of Hotspot. Urgent. Ukrainian defenders have turned the occupied territories into hell for the occupiers. Special Operations Forces drones have turned oil depots in Crimea into a fiery inferno. Donetsk is shaking from explosions. A Shahed drone warehouse has been leveled to the ground. The Ukrainian armed forces are breaking through enemy defenses. The deoccupation has begun. Proof of the fiery apocalypse and the first steps of liberation in a sensational report. Daria.
A unique operation that lasted for months ended with a spectacular explosion in the middle of Donetsk. According to locals, nothing like this has ever been seen before in the occupied territories. Where did the strikes hit? What was destroyed? And most importantly, what did the Ukrainian armed forces use to strike?
Judging by the special effects and the massive explosions, Flamingo missiles were used.
So, let's go through everything step by step. Last night, a powerful explosion rocked Donetsk, after which, according to eyewitness videos, a fireball resembling a nuclear mushroom cloud rose into the sky and windows were blown out in buildings several kilometers from the epicenter.
The windows were blown out.
Actually, this is the Oktyabrski airport area. A large ammunition depot. Missiles hit there. There's no official information yet, but people are already talking about an ammo depot. I watched the video. It's spectacular. Most likely, it really was a very large missile or shell depot, because in the video, the explosion looks like something out of a sci-fi movie or a computer game. And then there was a second explosion. You could clearly see this glowing, rapidly expanding shockwave. So it was a very successful strike on the Donetsk depots.
A bit later, the head of the Ukrainian Armed Forces drone systems, Robert Magyar Brudi, clarified the situation. According to his information, the strike hit a large depot of Shahed-type drones where warheads were also stored.
Tracking down this complex target turned into a months-long, painstaking intelligence operation pieced together from small fragments. Last night, it was struck by the appropriate means of the Ukrainian Special Operations Forces and missile troops of the Defense Forces.
Analysts note that despite the long range of the Shahed drones, it was extremely important for the Russians to keep the drone depot close to the front line. After all, when the occupiers launch UAVs just a few dozen kilometers from the line of contact, the Ukrainian armed forces simply do not have time to respond quickly. And as a result, the drones carry out their terror in frontline cities and also strike at the forward positions of our troops.
Disrupting the logistics of supplying shells, missiles and drones to the Pokrovsk direction, to Pokrovsk itself, is exactly what we need right now. This is very important for us right now.
But what the defense forces in our command chose not to disclose is this. One thing is certain. Drones definitely took part in the attack, but something else followed them in as well.
As the footage from there shows, it was clearly not just drones at work. There was, as can be understood, they were distracting the local air defense, but the final blow was delivered by something resembling a rocket. It may have been a drone or possibly a missile.
Reports from Magyar about the participation of Ukraine's missile forces in the attack also indicate that missiles were indeed used.
I don't think the warehouse with Shaheds was unprotected, that it was just simple hangars. Most likely we're talking about some kind of underground bunker. And that's another reason why I think these were Flowbings. Of course, they could have used Storm Shadow as well. Storm Shadow would have been suitable here too. They have a bunker-busting capability. Nevertheless, the scale of the detonation shows that, at least it seems to me, if you look at the first second, the explosion there was clearly bigger than a couple 100 kilograms of Storm Shadow's warhead.
So yes, most likely these were indeed our Ukrainian flamingos. By the way, this is already the third time just this week that they've inflicted colossal damage on the Russians. But in Crimea, such power wasn't needed, so drones were sent to attack the peninsula. In occupied Simferopol, around 2:30 in the morning, a fire broke out at an oil depot. Reportedly, this concerns Krimneftezbyt in the area of the village of Bitumnoye. There were also reports of 4 strikes in Gvardeyskoye, after which smoke rose into the sky. There, the hits likely struck the local thermal power plant, which temporarily ceased operations.
A strike of retribution. Ukrainian armed forces drones attacked the Kostroma thermal power plant, one of Russia's energy giants. The Kremlin is in panic. Nothing can save the Russian rear anymore. Even Moscow is plunging into utter darkness, cold, and hunger. And in Crimea, a new nightmare has begun. An oil depot, Krimneftezbyt, has caught fire in Simferopol. Fiery plumes can be seen for dozens of kilometers. On the front line, it's hell for the occupiers. Pokrovsk is holding the line. Ukraine is not giving up a single meter. The Ukrainian armed forces stand like a wall. The enemy is drowning in losses. All the details are in our military review, which you can't afford to miss.
Breaking news for the occupiers. According to local social media, after a drone strike in Simferopol, the Krimneftezbyt oil depot in the village of Bitumnoye is reportedly on fire.
It should be noted that after the strike by Ukrainian drones on the temporarily occupied territory of Crimea, 3 fuel and lubricant facilities are burning. Due to special operations, key fuel and energy infrastructure facilities in the temporarily occupied territory of Crimea, which are currently involved in supporting the logistics of the Russian occupation army, have come under drone attack. This oil depot is one of the key facilities for storing fuel and lubricants and accordingly is involved in the supply structure of material and technical support.
Drones attacked one of the largest power plants in Russia, the Kostroma State District Power Plant, GRS. Reports indicate explosions and a fire at the facility.
This power plant supplies virtually all the central regions of the Russian Federation. Accordingly, it is primarily involved in supplying electricity to enterprises of the Russian military-industrial complex. It should be noted that this power plant supplies virtually all the central regions of the Russian Federation. Therefore, strikes on this facility within the territory of the Russian Federation, which is a legitimate military target, have not only military economic significance, but above all, political and ideological implications as well.
In addition, drones visited the Lukoil oil refinery in Volgograd, which is also considered significant for the occupiers' army. And this is a video from the Special Operations Forces. It shows the destruction of an enemy storage base, the assembly, and the launch of a Shahed drone at Donetsk airport. It is noted that more than 90% of the drones launched by the Special Operations Forces reached their targets. Pokrovsk is neither surrounded nor under enemy control. Most of the city is a gray zone. Both the Ukrainian armed forces and Russian opposition forces are present there, according to deep state analysts.
There are also ongoing and accordingly successful actions to unblock logistics for the armed forces of Ukraine. Special operations units, the main intelligence directorate of the Ministry of Defense of Ukraine, and other components of Ukraine's defense forces have been deployed to the city. In addition, the grouping of Ukraine's defense forces in Pokrovsk has been reinforced. It has been increased with operational reserves and supplemented with armored vehicles.
In this footage, fighters from the Skelya Assault Regiment returned the Ukrainian flag to its rightful place, namely to the city council building in Pokrovsk, which confirms that the city stands firm, just like all of Ukraine, and will surely withstand all the trials prepared by the occupiers. Sensational. The Ukrainian defense industry is breaking the mold. Our engineers have created their own version of the Chinese Mavics. And this is just the beginning. The factories are running like clockwork. Every day brings new drones, armor, and targeting systems. The speed is lightning fast, the effectiveness is deadly. We will show how Ukrainian minds are forging victory right before the eyes of the world. Watch exclusive footage right now.
Reconnaissance, fire adjustment, and target destruction using dropped munitions. The Chinese Mavic drone is almost the main weapon of the Ukrainian armed forces in the war against the occupier. And now Ukrainian industry has begun supplying domestically produced Mavic-type UAVs to the front lines.
A certain Mr. X invested, created a Ukrainian Mavic, and we'll see it soon. We've already delivered the first 1,000 to the battlefield.
Compared to the Chinese Mavic, the Ukrainian counterpart has a greater flight range and can carry a larger payload. It is used not only for reconnaissance but also for strike missions. The importance of the appearance of Ukrainian drones in this niche is hard to overestimate, since there are huge problems with the supply of Mavics to Ukraine.
DJI has banned sales to Ukraine, piously stating that its products are not intended for military purposes, so drones have to be purchased from third parties. The security issues are obvious. The Pentagon has banned any use of DJI drones, which send data back to the manufacturer. DJI has also added security features that make it impossible for the latest models to fly in geo-blocked zones, including Ukraine, without extensive hacking. Finally, sovereign drone production appears to be a key strategic capability for the future.
The Chinese Mavic drone's counterpart is called the Shmavic, and despite its ironic name, it has already passed. It has been certified and boasts some serious features.
The Shmavic is positioned as a tactical reconnaissance drone designed to carry out operational tasks on the front lines, unlike the civilian Mavic, which is mainly used for aerial photography and videography. The Shmavic is built for combat conditions. It has an operational range of up to 15 kilometers, a flight duration of up to 60 minutes, and is equipped with a reliable navigation system that is resistant to interference.
As early as last year, the government announced its interest in replacing Chinese drones. Now, manufacturers have already completed certification of Ukrainian Mavics, and production has been established.
As of today, it is impossible to completely replace the entire fleet of foreign drones currently being used in Ukraine in the short term. Our weapons manufacturers already have developments and designs in place that meet the needs of our security and defense forces. Now it is necessary to scale up this production, minimize the number of foreign equivalents as much as possible, and transition to domestic models.
There are already many Ukrainian analogs of the Mavic, including Ukr-Porter, Yaitia, and the charming Shmavik. They are larger than DJI Mavic drones and are equipped with long-range communication. They are more resistant to interference and cost more, but they may turn out to be more economical due to their greater reliability.
For us, the key indicator is not the price per drone, but the cost of a single mission. While a typical Mavic performs about 60 missions per drone, our systems average around 300 missions per unit. With a comparable purchase price, the cost of a single mission is 5 times lower. This means that military units operating our drones receive a much greater overall economic benefit. Drone manufacturer.
Independent UAV production is a crucial element of modern warfare, and Ukraine knows this better than anyone. Because short-range UAVs and long-range strike drones have become key components of national defense.
Every voice matters. Join our community, support independent journalism, and help us bring you the truth from Ukraine. Become a member of Ukraine today. Join us now.
Shock, nuclear bluff is turning into reality. Russia and the United States are exchanging threats capable of wiping cities off the face of the earth. America is deploying missiles in Europe with flight times to Moscow measured in mere minutes. Moscow responds with tests of new doomsday weapons. The world is teetering on the edge. Just how close is humanity to catastrophe? Footage that will send chills down your spine. Watch right now.
The doomsday clock is approaching. Midnight. After Putin refused to accept Trump's terms for ending the war in Ukraine, Russia and the US began brandishing their nuclear clubs. In the White House and the Kremlin, they started considering conducting nuclear
tests. The Russian Federation is currently attempting to use the topic of possible nuclear tests as what it considers to be the last argument of kings, a final resort, in the ongoing pursuit of its own strategic plans to bring about an end to the war. During this period, the Russian government has been emphasizing the potential for such tests as a means to influence the outcome of the conflict, hoping to sway international opinion and achieve its objectives through this demonstration of power.
The meeting between Putin and the Russian Security Council, Defense Minister Andrei Belousov suggested to the dictator to prepare for full-scale nuclear tests, calling it a response to US actions.
At the end of this year, the adoption of the new Dark Eagle medium-range missile system is planned. With hypersonic missiles that have a range of 5,500 kilometers, and in the future, the deployment of this system is planned in Europe and the Asia-Pacific region. The flight time of such a missile from German territory, where this missile system is planned to be stationed, to targets in central Russia will be about 6 to 7 minutes.
In reality, it was Putin and his cronies who first set the wheels of nuclear escalation in motion.
The creation of the Burevestnik made it possible to conduct tests of the Poseidon. There is simply no equal to this weapon. The president personally oversaw the implementation of this project from start to finish. The president personally oversaw the implementation of this project from start to finish. We are now seeing the results of the country's increased defense capability. And today, those abroad who wish us harm must. They should be preparing to approach our Supreme Commander-in-Chief with a bow, just so that this weapon is never used.
The statement by the US president about possible nuclear tests, as well as the launch of the Minuteman III intercontinental ballistic missile, were responses to the threats posed by the Burevestnik and Poseidon.
Russia is conducting tests, China is conducting tests, but they don't talk about it. You know, we are an open society, we are different. We have to talk about it, otherwise you'll write about it yourselves. They don't have journalists who would write about it. We will conduct tests.
Nuclear tests are a serious step. Officially, the superpowers have not conducted them for more than 30 years. Moscow last tested its atomic weapon in 1990, the US in 1992. The key document regarding mutual deterrence between the two nuclear superpowers is the bilateral treaty between Russia and the US, New START, on mutual reduction and monitoring of nuclear arsenals. The document is valid until February 2026. But in 2023, the occupying country unilaterally suspended the treaty. Currently, in nuclear matters, China has the greatest influence on the non-proliferation regime.
Beijing has not yet had its final say. And let me remind you, it was precisely the reaction of official Beijing that once put an end to the matter. In the Russian Federation's attempts to destabilize the international situation at the moment of a possible use of tactical nuclear weapons against the territory of Ukraine.
It is no coincidence that after meeting with Xi Jinping in South Korea, Donald Trump announced work on a denuclearization plan for the US, Russia and China. According to experts, if Moscow does not abandon its nuclear rhetoric in the near future, in addition to American pressure, the Russian authorities will also start to feel pressure from the Chinese.
In addition to the corresponding military pressure from the United States on the Russian Federation and their pointed responses, we should also expect corresponding diplomatic efforts from official Beijing.
A sensation. A major meeting of the world's titans. Donald Trump and Xi met face-to-face for the first time since the American leader's re-election. According to Trump, the meeting went amazingly, but what lies behind those smiles? Deals, pressure, new agreements, or a geopolitical upheaval? All the details of behind-the-scenes diplomacy are only in our exclusive coverage.
Donald Trump met with Xi Jinping in South Korea as part of his tour of the Indo-Pacific region. The main topics of the meeting were trade barriers between the countries and, of course, the Russia-Ukraine war.
They moved toward establishing a more forward-looking joint agenda for political dialogue, which, in principle, is a very positive outcome of this meeting.
As a result of the meeting, the parties agreed to reduce the tariff on Chinese goods related to fentanyl, a synthetic opioid analgesic, from 20% to 10%. The overall level of US tariffs will reach up to 47%.
The fundamental issues underlying the conflict between the US and China have not gone anywhere. And these are very important issues, such as the fate of the island of Taiwan and the possibility of imposing tariffs on Chinese goods specifically because of the purchase of Russian oil. Well, Trump put it diplomatically. These issues were not raised, but you know, in such cases, as a rule, when no agreement is reached, they say that we didn't talk about it.
The agreements regarding Ukraine were less productive. despite the fact that, according to the US president, Ukraine was discussed at length. Initially, Trump wanted to persuade Xi to reduce support for Russia so that Putin would agree to end the war. Whether the parties reached any agreement in this direction was not stated.
A strategic dialogue of cooperation has been established between authoritarian Russia and authoritarian Beijing. And to risk that, Xi, in exchange, would have to receive something more substantial and significant, something that would correspond to the high level of relations between America and Beijing. Given that for now the relationship more closely resembles the logic of de-escalatory actions in the trade and economic sphere, I wouldn't say that at this particular moment. Between Washington and Beijing, there is any significant or fundamental change taking place. A strategic alliance or dialogue has been established.
Donald Trump rated the meeting a 12 out of 10. By the way, this was the first meeting between the leaders of the US and China in the past 6 years.
Based on the statement, we see that there will be no tariffs on Chinese goods and there will be access for American agricultural products. It seems like a good statement, but how true that really is, again, considering President Trump's experience, let's at least remember Trump's statement that peace has been achieved in the Middle East after 3,000 years. You know, I'm someone who reads news from the Middle East, and what's happening there doesn't even remotely resemble achieving peace in that region to me. So, Trump's statement that everything has been agreed with China and everything is wonderful. But let's at least wait 48 hours and then see what happens.
Trump said that he had agreed with Xi Jinping on a visit to China in the spring of next year. After that, there will be a return visit by the Chinese leader to the United States.
Shock. A real hunt has begun in the occupied territories. Horror and panic. The occupiers are conducting raids on men right in the middle of the streets. People are being grabbed without explanation and immediately sent into the meat grinder of the front. Families are hiding their sons and husbands in basements, but the enforcers are combing through everything. What is happening behind the scenes of the occupation of the Russian world? Shocking footage and witness testimonies are coming up next.
Ole, from the occupied city of Torez in Donetsk region, went to the local military enlistment office to register on the third day after his 18th birthday. He was immediately told, either you sign a contract or you go to prison. There is no third option. At
the enlistment office, they threatened me with prison. They said if I didn't sign, I'd be facing a sentence of 5 to 7 years. It was impossible to leave the training ground. The control was extremely strict. At every corner of the camp, there were military patrols.
The inhumane treatment by Russian instructors drove young men to suicide. But even those who withstood this pressure didn't live long. Those residents from the temporarily occupied territories who end up in the Russian army are sent straight into local assaults after only a brief training. Oleg was lucky, he surrendered immediately and survived.
The attitude of the command towards the hunters. Because we were from the occupied territories, they blamed us for everything that was happening, for the war. The command would often say, "Get there and we'll drop you some food." We'd reach the designated point, but nothing was ever dropped. We lived in the forest belts without food or water. We chewed on whatever we could.
There are many people like Oleg. The temporarily occupied territories of Ukraine have been incorporated into the Southern Military District. And there they plan to recruit up to 100,000 soldiers into the Russian army. This was reported by Dmytro Kukarchuk, Deputy Commander of the 3rd Army Corps of the Ukrainian Armed Forces.
Russia has officially incorporated the occupied territories of Ukraine into the Southern Military District. And now it is beginning to mobilize the local population. The occupiers plan to mobilize 50,000 to 100,000 men between the ages of 18 and 55. Previously, for the war against Ukraine, mobilization was carried out only in the occupied territories of Donetsk, Luhansk regions, and Crimea.
The Russian State Duma has passed a law that allows conscription into the army throughout the entire year from January 1st to December 31st. Russia has legalized the conscription of residents from the temporarily occupied territories of Ukraine. Now, mobilization can be carried out throughout the entire year. According to the new rules, after receiving an electronic summons, a person is required to report to the so-called military enlistment office no later than 30 days later. According to
CNS data, the occupation military enlistment offices in Melitopol have already received instructions from Moscow to begin compiling military lists of men aged 18 to 50. In Melitopol, they are once again going door to door checking documents, especially those of utility workers, construction workers, and security guards, people who can be quickly sent to the second line without any preparation.
Previously, mobilization activities were carried out only in the occupied territories of Donetsk, Luhansk regions, and in Crimea. Now, these measures have expanded to all occupied regions, which indicates yet another attempt by the Kremlin to make up for losses at the front at the expense of Ukrainians.
Forced mobilization in the occupied territories, that's what I was talking about. The number, let's say, of personnel in the 1st and 2nd so-called Army Corps of the LNR. From 35,000, it was already increased to 100,000 in 2022. Now, in the occupied territories of the Luhansk region, some towns are called women's towns by the locals themselves. Not because, well, let's say it's not meant as an insult. It's because of the complete absence of men. Total mobilization.
The losses in local assaults somehow need to be compensated. The number of contract soldiers and even the money for them is decreasing. Total mobilization in the temporarily occupied territories is an attempt to make up for the losses. Having survived and ended up in Ukrainian captivity, Oleg realized that his life in the Russian army wasn't worth a dime.
After joining the Russian army, I realized it's all bullshit because they just want to wipe us all out here. That's
all there is to it. And for more hot news from the front, tune in to our next episode.